Welcome to this review slash retrospective for the game Fallout 2 that I just recently finished playing. And just going to give you my brief thoughts on the video game while I let a little recording montage that I made earlier play in the background. So I've got all my notes here in front of me so that hopefully I can keep my thoughts a little organized as I talk about the game. And yeah, let's go ahead and just jump right into it. And I guess the best thing to really start off with is you have to really compare it to its predecessor, Fallout 1. And in a lot of the ways, I feel like the game engine itself feels like it's a refinement of Fallout 1 rather than a big step forward in evolution, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it still feels very similar to the first game overall, but better. So by saying that, basically, even though it's better than the first game, it still has that clunky feeling to the game. Now, I played it via the GOG, the way they have it set up, and they have the latest patch, and they had SFall, which is a script extender. Oddly enough, I did look up the SFall website, and there is a newer version of that particular, I guess you wouldn't really call it a mod as so much as a script extender. So theoretically, if you're running this, clean, there are newer versions of that patch available that you can use. The only thing besides Asphalt that they had was the widescreen patch, so that it, takes up, a widescreen resolution that the majority of monitors nowadays use. And I believe you can set the renderer to, I think, DirectX 9. I could be mistaken about that. I obviously only set it up when I first started running it. It's not like I went back and saw what else was available, but that's pretty much the recommended way of running the game. And unlike the first Fallout, this game occasionally would start to stutter out on me and just slow down and just start to stutter a little bit. And I would just do a save, exit the game and come back in, and it'd be completely and totally resolved. It happened a handful of times. I don't want to say it happened frequently, because it didn't, because I think I could probably count most likely on one hand, maybe pull a finger or two from the second hand to count how many times it happened. But it's definitely something to make note of, is that there was this stuttering effect that could happen with this game that I didn't see in the first game. Having said that, though, they both have the tendency to be very accurate. Like, you have to click right on that little circle, and it's a little circle, very hard to aim your mouse on sometimes. And I guess there's just a little bit of a twitchiness, or I don't know how you would describe it, basically, with the mouse movement and trying to get that specific click sometimes. And that just may be an aspect of the widescreen resolution and running it in DirectX 9. Honestly, not entirely sure. Much like the first Fallout game, inventory management can really become tedious, to say the least, especially when you start hitting the late game stages. I spent many hours just dealing with inventory and trying to sell stuff off and just organize things, and it does get tedious. Now, again, a big portion of that does lie on me, and being someone who goes around and is kind of like a pack rat and consistently is trying to loot as much as I can. I guess one of the things that they didn't have on a lot of the enemies that you killed is you couldn't loot their armor more often than not. So that's kind of a pro and a con in a way, because that just means I had less loot to get. But at the same time, getting armors was a little bit more difficult in this game because of that. But I do want to say, like, inventory management as the game progresses can become very tedious. And that's something that was familiar with the first game, that's same in this game. Having said that, though, your interactions with merchants is actually really a lot better. And I gotta really stress the point. Like, for instance, in the first game, you could have at most, I think, 999 caps that you could turn in at a time. So when you're trying to buy stuff, you're sitting there dropping 999 caps, 900, whatever it added up to get to how many caps you needed to buy an item. Now that has been expanded to the point where you can just type in exactly what you need. And I believe it even goes all the way up to, like, theoretically 99,999, but chances of you seeing that much money in the game are pretty slim, to say the least. But it definitely made interacting with the merchants significantly better than the first game. It was just a major improvement in just that one little aspect. The only thing I would say that kind of stunk about the merchant interactions is the fact that a lot of them just didn't have a lot of gold. So even though you might have had a lot of stuff to sell, you can only offload so much because most of the merchants were pretty broke, to say the least, basically. And that definitely contributed to the inventory management issues that you experience in the game. Graphically, it's really more the same, to be honest. There's not a huge upgrade in graphics or sound. I mean, I think the graphics look good, and the sound is still very good and immersive. So that didn't really need to have a huge improvement. But by that same token, I believe this game came out only 1 year after the original Fallout. So kind of to be expected that there's not a huge leap in those two areas. I would say and this is kind of a good timing here, the skill system is very familiar with the first game. It's almost exactly the same. I think it might very well be the exact same skills in the skill system, but now it feels like some of the skills that before were completely and totally pointless actually have a use in this game. And there's a lot of them that I didn't use because I was like, oh, I don't need this. It actually did hurt me in certain areas. So I feel like a lot of the skills now could be, depending on your playstyle, could be useful. I mean, there's still some that are not great. I think the throwing skill is pretty much pointless still, for instance. And there's still plenty of skills that can be neglected, but at the same token, there are other skills now that before you'd had no use for, you actually can make use of a lot of them. Like, I mean, the science skill, there are certain areas the science skill could be very helpful, and my science skill really wasn't all that great. Good enough to get me through most areas, but they definitely improved that aspect for sure. I think there are some extra perks. For the most part, the majority of the same perks from the first game are in this one, and they've added a few more, or a handful more. I'd say more than a few for sure. For instance, like, you can raise your stats with a perk, amongst other things. And so there are more perks in the game, to say the least. But I wouldn't say there's so many perks added to the game that it feels like it's a drastic overhaul compared to the first game. It's just it's the first game only expanded a little bit, and that's fine. I mean, there's probably more perks than you needed anyway, and a lot of useless perks, to say the least. So there is that aspect. That's still there. There's a lot of perks that are still fairly useless. There are some that are completely and totally useless, that literally serve no purpose at all other than to stroke your own ego, I guess. So there's that aspect. Companion choices. While you see me walking down here, I do want to touch on the companion system in this game, because that's another area that actually was very greatly expanded upon. First of all, there's a lot of companions in the game. Just looking at the list of them, I think there is something like 10 to somewhere between 10 and 15 companions that you could potentially recruit. And the companion system is based off of your charisma. So they actually made charisma a stat that was actually worth putting points into. Now, your mileage may vary on whether or not you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. I personally think it is realistic to actually have you required to have some level of charisma if you want to recruit people to your cause. It makes a lot of sense. So by them actually adding that aspect to the game, it's a good thing. It makes it a little more realistic, to say the least. And I think just a good addition overall. So the companions, there's a lot of them, and you're just not going to be able to recruit all of them in the game, even if you had a 10 charisma, for instance. That's only 5 companions total that you could theoretically recruit at any one time. So you got to pick and choose, and it just really adds to the replayability of the game as to which companions you can get. And also, it's not something that I came across, but if you happen to be a little more evil aligned, that also limits the amount of companions that you can get in the game. Or certain guys just will not join up with you if you're, say, a slaver, for instance. So that is definitely a good improvement overall, to say the least. The inventory system for companions, the overhaul that they did on that was just absolutely amazing. Like before in Fallout 1, I would just start handing stuff to my companions and hope that they, until it told me they couldn't carry anything else, basically. I had literally no idea what they had or how much more room they had. Whereas in this game, you know exactly what they're using, what you can give them armor. Like before, you couldn't even upgrade the armor on the companions. Now you can. You can give them different weapons. Now you can give them different weapons in the first game, but I think this way you could actually really control what weapon they used. So that was very handy. And of course, then there's always this is how much they can carry, so you know where they're at as far as that's concerned. So that's just a huge upgrade. Another aspect of the companion system that is good is the fact that you have the ability to modify their behavior, and you can just basically select how they're going to act, which for the most part works pretty decently, but sometimes I got a little bit of wonky results. I think, like for instance, I set Vic to sniper at one time, and he just was walking back and forth and not doing anything. So sometimes it works pretty decent, sometimes it doesn't. So, but the fact that you have the ability to change the way companions behave is really good. Because in the first game, the only thing you could tell them was, I need you to be close to me, a little ways from me, a long ways away from me. That was all you could do. So the fact that you can actually tweak companions' behaviors to a pretty decent degree here in this game is another really good improvement that they did. Like I said, the whole theme of this is it's the first game only refined to a much better degree. And one of the best aspects of that is the companion system by far. Another thing I liked about it is there's no rush to get the main quest done. Even when you're getting those hallucination dreams, whatever you want to call them, from the medicine man, he's trying to tell you, hurry up, hurry up. There really is no time limit. Whereas the first game, there was a time limit for how long you had to get that water chip, and then how long you had to actually beat the master. And you had to get it all done, I believe, in less than 500 days overall. Whereas with this game, I think I took over 3 years just to even get back to my village. And now part of that is because, well, the area is a lot bigger as well. So I'm glad that they didn't try to force you to hurry up like they did in the first game. So that's really nice. But yeah, the world is much bigger. There's a lot more side quests in the game. In fact, a lot of the side quests contradict themselves, because there's a lot of different factions in all the different areas that you can go to. And so it continues to add to the replayability of this game, because the game does have a very high replayability factor, to say the least. New Reno, for instance. I mean, if you're going to be a made man in New Reno, you're really only going to be able to do it with one family. There's a lot of different endings in this game. Obviously, a heck of a lot more endings in this game than the first one. Just a lot of different things that you can do that wasn't available in the first game. And it does, like I said, adds to the replayability, but also to the depth of the game, which I find is a good thing. The car that you see in the background is probably one of the best, another really good addition, because yeah, the world's larger, but when you're driving around in this highway, man, you know, getting around it is actually very, very simple, and it's a really good addition, and almost, I guess we would have to say, essential for the size of the game world, basically. But it was a great addition to be able to just drive a car around. So that was really cool. The game itself, for the most part, other than that stuttering issue that I mentioned, felt pretty stable. Trying to think, was there ever any time that I had a crash in the game? I can't really honestly think of a time where the game crashed on me. So from a stability perspective, pretty good. It did have the same issue that Fallout 1 did, in the fact that if I alt-tabbed out while I was in a conversation or dealing with a merchant, which I guess is technically a conversation, when I came back into the game, the whole screen would be black. And I'd have to move my mouse back and forth to draw the screen, as it were, so that I could actually see things again. And that bug remained this time around. And I think that's probably something to do with the widescreen patch, most likely. But yeah, that bug or feature, however you want to term it, remained in this game. That was in the first game. But other than that, I think the game itself was pretty good from a stability perspective. Like I said, it felt a little clunky at times, somehow, like, you know, the screen movement and things of that nature here and there. But for the most part, a very stable experience. I didn't have any problems running it. Granted, I'm running a Windows 10, so if you're running, say, a newer operating system like Windows 11, I can't honestly speak to how it works on that, but I think your mileage may vary, but probably not. I think it works pretty well on any Windows system that you're running. I wish I had Linux installed right now so I could actually test the performance on Linux, but I don't currently, so there's that. One aspect of the game that I do feel is kind of a bit of a letdown in a certain way is it was really difficult to come across armor in the game. By the time I got power armor, and the only reason I got power armor is because I did a side diversion to the military base, which coincidentally was in the first game, and that diversion got me power armor, but that was so late in the game, and you know, getting power armor suits was fairly difficult to come by, so I only had 3 of my guys, well, 2 of my guys and myself, with power armor in the game. Theoretically, I guess I could have tried to find some more suits elsewhere, but you know, that at this rate, it was basically, this is what I had. And so we didn't come across any of the good armors like combat armor or anything like that until much later in the game. And like the Brotherhood of Steel wouldn't even really talk to us until we got at San Francisco, which is pretty much the end of the game at that point. So that was kind of a bit of a letdown. So I got a lot of the really good armors, the really good weapons and whatnot, literally at the very end of the game. And I mean, I mean, I guess it's a minor criticism, really, because especially stuff like that, the Gauss rifle that I had, or Gauss, I'm not exactly sure how you say it. That thing was really, really good. In fact, it was so good to the point where I felt like I wasted my time putting anything into energy weapons. And which is kind of weird because by the time you even get to even use something like energy weapons or the big guns, they're not a huge improvement. Because if you can come get that Gauss rifle, and even before I got the Gauss rifle, a lot of the small guns that I was using were extremely effective. So it definitely kind of made using big guns and or energy weapons kind of, pointless to a certain extent, I guess is the best way I can say of describing it, unfortunately, because I kind of really wanted to use the energy weapons and see a massive improvement, but there just really wasn't a massive improvement. And like I said, that Gauss rifle, that was so powerful. I mean, when I got to the final boss, I was like, yeah, I'm just going to keep using this because it seems to be doing the best damage to him, and it really did. Speaking of that last boss, though, like when you're fighting him, he says that the conversation I had with him is like, he called you a mutie. And I actually looked him up. I'm like, wait a minute, you're calling me a mutie? And I was like, yeah. I looked it up on the wiki, and sure enough, he's a super mutant. I was like, who are you calling a mutant, buddy? It's like the pot calling kettle black. Anyway, that's just another little side note there. I thought it was kind of interesting that he said that. The final portion of the game, so the Navarro base and the Enclave oil rig, really don't lend themselves to a go in guns blazing play style. They just really don't. They are very heavily geared towards go in there via subterfuge and sneak in and get what you need to do and get out. And I don't know if I like that aspect of the game. I guess theoretically you could go to the Navarro base with your whole group and try to lay waste to everything, but it would be pretty dangerous. I did consider trying that, before I went to the oil rig because I could get a lot of experience for doing that. Because the tunnel that the Deathclaw escaped out of, I could have gone through there and just gone through the tunnel area and killed a lot of stuff. So it was something I considered, but at that point I'd already been playing the game long enough. I just kind of wanted to beat it, and sure enough, I probably didn't really need the extra experience. The game is a slow burn, much like the first game, or most RPGs, to be fair. I think it was probably around level 12 or 15 when things started to get a little bit easier for me. But overall, I think the game is definitely well balanced and is set up. And like I said, the replayability for this game is just really high, and I think that's a good thing. And there's a lot of mods available for the game that add a lot of stuff, not just adding the way you play the game, but also adding completely new storylines. And that's a really neat feature that I think expands on the replayability aspect of it, to say the least. But yeah, that's basically all my thoughts of the game. I don't think there's anything I left out at this point. It's definitely a really good game, and I think it's definitely something that I would highly recommend anybody who's familiar or who wants to know more about Fallout, give a try. And on the point system, basically, I would probably rate this about a 90%. It's much better than Fallout 1. A little bit clunky, and the inventory management does get very tedious. So from that aspect, that does hurt it a little bit and bring it down. But I think 90%, it's still a pretty good score, and it's still an extremely good game and well worth your time. Goodbye, Chris. And that's basically my thoughts on the game. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Take care.